decides to march the invading army north, towards Pyron, as she realized in order to threaten the Shieldian capital, she had to travel through a nether gate. These mystical portals were the only link between the nether and the overworld, and at the time, the ones in the Shire were destroyed, fearing that the enemy would think of using them for supplies, completely rendering harassing their supply lines in the overworld useless. Nevertheless, Lorraine quickly marched her army, sending envoys to Pit City, informing them of their arrival. After a 3-day march, traversing the swampy terrain south of Pyron, the 4 divisions finally arrived. And to their astonishment, about 400 meters away from the city encamped a dozen troops. Thinking it was a Pyrene army, they advanced hastily to ask for passage through the nether gate. Closing the distance, Lorraine realized how dire the situation really was, as the banners of this foreign force were enough to neutral Pyrene forces, but another Shieldian army, led by General Gorbash, sent to annihilate them before entering the nether gate and threatening the capital. It seemed that the envoys she sent were intercepted. She quickly gave the order to assemble the battle line and encountered the enemy forces on the battlefield. Both sides began deployment. Gorbash formed the usual fairly even line, with a strong right flank, comprising of their most elite soldiers, and regular troops making up the rest of the line, leaving cavalry in reserve, due to the battlefield being bordered by the swamp to the south, and a dark oak forest to the north, heavily restricting cavalry movement. Lorraine was expected to roughly mirror the Shieldian array, placing her best men on the right wing, and hoping for a favorable outcome. But instead she employed a different approach. The Shire's cavalry was also put in reserve, while their most experienced unit were placed on the left flank, directly against the Shieldian's best men, making it deeper than usual, likely to add more pushing power and overwhelm the enemy, hopefully breaking their cohesion. Lorraine ordered her men to move forward in an echelon formation, with their left spearheading the attack, and the rest of the line lagging behind, to avoid the clash as long as possible. Gorbash eventually realized the different alignment of the enemy line and yielded orders to reform his own line. But soon, the Shire's left flank slammed into the Shieldians, and a fierce scrum of battle ensued. The shouting of orders was barely audible, among the horrific clamor of bent armor and agony, as men perished, one by one, on both sides. But the military prowess of the Shire's best men soon yielded the results Lorraine had hoped for. The Shieldian right flank crumbled, being pushed back, and soon many leading officers were slain. It was a crushing blow for the Shieldians, as their right flank collapsed, and the Shirelings advanced to take hold of the nether gate. Soon enough, Lorraine gave the order to her troops to start deployment on the other side of the nether gate, crossing to the underworld, Shield's main territory. The road to the capital is on the horizon. There is nothing in Lorraine's way but a fraction of the garrison militia, guarding the only bridge over the lava stream. But it was no easy task. The Shire's cavalry was rendered useless due to their horses being terrified of crossing a narrow bridge over the river of liquid lava. Moreover, Shield is surrounded by soul sand. This kind of terrain is almost impossible to traverse on foot, let alone mounted units, which perform better in flat terrain even. With all these drawbacks, Lorraine wasted no time and ordered a direct assault through the bridge. It was just a matter of time for the Shieldians. The battle hardened, Tulipians made the better of the situations, thus yielding considerable damage, with no hope left. What was spared of the Shieldian garrison surrendered, and the capital was soon annexed. Although Ajaj was still on the front lines, fighting the staggering siege of Reveille's fortified positions, making considerable progress. It is said that Ajaj personally asked Reveille about the current situation of Shire's unification. Reveille responded that it is unified enough, but Ajaj simply asked sarcastically, "Can the dead disagree?" Many historians debate this actually happened, so we cannot know for sure. But it was one of the talks that led to the horrific genocide of the Tulipian people, during the fighting that ensued throughout the weeks in the Shire. Nevertheless, news of the capital's surrender soon reached Ajaj, and he had to accept Reveille's demands, then withdrew his troops, and agreed to discuss reasonable peace terms. This bloody feud between the Tulipians and the Shieldians virtually had no changes to the borders of the two nations, but resulted in the unification of the entirety of Shire under one name, thus forming the new Tilipian Empire in the southern corner of the world, dramatically changing the balance of power and setting a course of events that will soon lead to the First World War.